They made me kneel in my own living room while his mother cut up my wedding dress with kitchen scissors. The red wine dripped down my face, mixing with my tears, while his entire family laughed. His pregnant mistress laughed. My own husband laughed.
Here are the papers,
They
Elena.
called me a
Sign them
gold
and
digger,
leave.
a
I can't
charity
sign
case,
anything,
a
Victoria.
nobody.
Not while I'm
What they did
carrying
not
this
know,
child.
what none of them knew, was that I was
Elena,
worth
look at me.
$3.2 billion,
You're not alone.
40 times their entire
Let me
family
help
fortune.
you.
I could have bought their hotel empire with what I spent on coffee last year. But I did not tell them, not yet, because I wanted them to believe they had won. I wanted them to feel safe in their cruelty. And then I wanted to watch their faces when they discovered they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. My name is Elena Mitchell, and this is the story of how a family tried to bury me without knowing I was a seed. If you have ever been underestimated, dismissed, or thrown away by people who thought you were beneath them, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now, because what happens next will have you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. This story will teach you 3 powerful lessons. First, never reveal your full strength to people who have already shown you their true colors. Second, the people who try to bury you have no idea they are planting a seed. And third, real power is not about destroying your enemies. It is about building something they can never tear down. If you are going through a season where someone has made you feel worthless, small, or invisible, stay until the end. Because this woman's journey, from the cold floor of her living room to watching her enemies crumble, will remind you exactly who you are. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The Harrison mansion had never felt like home. 6 months of marriage, and I was still a guest in my own life. Still hoping that Victoria, my mother-in-law, would warm up to me. Still believing that Richard, my father-in-law, might one day acknowledge my existence with something other than cold indifference. Still telling myself that Marcus loved me enough to make all of their hostility worthwhile. I was so naive, so desperately, foolishly naive. You have to understand something about me. I grew up in foster care, 17 different homes in 11 years. I learned very early that family was not something you were born into. It was something you had to earn, fight for, prove yourself worthy of receiving. So when Marcus Harrison swept into my life with his easy smile and his promises of forever, I believed him. I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored every red flag, dismissed every warning sign, explained away every moment of doubt. That was my first mistake. It would not be my last. The evening that changed everything started like any other. I came home early from my part-time job at the community college, where I taught coding classes for $35 an hour. It was honest work, humble work, the kind of work that made the Harrisons look at me like I was something unpleasant they had accidentally stepped in. What they did not know, what nobody knew except my closest confidants, was that I did not need that job. I did not need any job. I owned the building where I taught. I sat on the board of a $21 billion technology company. The charity run, where I had met their precious son 3 years ago, had been funded entirely by my own money. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the double life I had been living and why I had chosen to hide everything I had built. My name is Elena Mitchell, but in the business world, I am known as Elena Sterling, the founder of Nova Mind AI, the woman who sold her artificial intelligence startup for $800 million at the age of 28 and retained 15% equity in the company. That 15% is now worth $3.2 billion. Yes, billion. With a B. But after 2 devastating relationships where men transformed from loving partners into manipulative gold diggers the moment they discovered my wealth, I made a decision. The next man I loved would never know about the money. Not until I was absolutely certain he loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. So I created a double life. Public Elena lived in a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood. She drove a 10-year-old Honda. She worked part-time as a coding instructor. She volunteered at the local church food bank. She had no social media presence, no flashy lifestyle, no visible signs of wealth. Secret Elena owned that apartment building anonymously. She flew to Manhattan once a month for board meetings. She had accounts worth billions that she never touched for her daily life. She watched the men she dated, waiting to see if they would love her when they thought she had nothing. Marcus Harrison had been my test, and for 8 months of dating, followed by 6 months of marriage, I thought he had passed. I was wrong. I remember the exact moment everything changed. I can still feel it in my body, the way my heart stopped, the way the air left my lungs, the way time seemed to freeze around me. I was walking through our apartment, a gift bag in my hands. Inside were tiny yellow baby shoes, the first thing I had ever bought for our child. I had found out that morning at the doctor's office. Pregnant. 6 weeks along, a tiny life growing inside me, proof that the future I had dreamed about was finally taking shape. I was going to tell Marcus over a special dinner. I had already planned the menu, his favorite wine, candles on the table, and then the reveal, the baby shoes, the tears of joy, the beginning of our real life together. I was humming to myself as I walked down the hallway toward our bedroom. That is how happy I was. Humming, like a character in a romantic comedy, moments before the horror begins. Then I heard his voice drifting through the partially open door. "I know, Mother. I understand. The prenup is solid. She gets nothing." I froze in the hallway. My heart, which had been so full of joy moments ago, suddenly started pounding with a very different emotion. Yes, I will file after Dad's deal closes. 3 more months. She has no idea. The gift bag slipped from my fingers. The baby shoes hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud that sounded like thunder in my ears. Marcus appeared in the doorway. His face cycled through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise first. His eyes widening as he saw me standing there. Then calculation, as his mind raced through the implications of what I had heard. And finally, something cold and empty that I had never seen before. A stranger's face on the man I had married. "How long have you been standing there?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. Barely a whisper. Long enough. What happened next was clearly orchestrated, planned down to the smallest detail. I realized that now, looking back. They had been preparing for this moment for weeks, maybe months. They had anticipated every possible scenario, blocked every potential escape route. Before I could process what was happening, before I could even begin to understand the scope of the betrayal, the doorbell rang. Marcus walked past me like I was furniture and opened the door. The entire Harrison family entered our apartment like an invading army. Victoria came first, my mother-in-law, dressed head to toe in designer clothing that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her smile never reached her eyes. It never had, not once in the 6 months I had known her. Behind her came Richard, my father-in-law, a retired federal judge with the bearing of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He surveyed the apartment with undisguised contempt, like he was inspecting a crime scene. Then came Ashley Summers, a beautiful blonde woman I had never met before, visibly pregnant, her hand resting on her belly in a possessive gesture that sent ice through my veins. She was maybe 5 months along, showing clearly in a way that I would not be for months yet. And finally, hanging back near the door like she wanted to disappear into the wall, came Courtney Harrison, Marcus's younger sister. the only member of his family who had ever shown me genuine kindness. Her eyes were already filled with tears, and she would not look at me directly. Victoria circled me slowly, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown to something terrible. Her perfume was overwhelming, expensive, and suffocating. So this is the little charity case who thought she could climb into our family. My voice came out shaky, but defiant. Marcus, what is this? What is happening? Richard stepped forward, his presence filling the room like a physical weight. This is an intervention, young lady. You have made a terrible mistake, and we are here to correct it. Victoria stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could see the careful application of her makeup. The tiny lines around her eyes that even the best cosmetic procedures could not completely erase. Did you think we would not investigate you? Foster care? No family, no connections, no money. You are nobody, Elena, and nobodies do not marry Harrisons. I tried to stand my ground. I tried to summon the strength that had carried me through 17 foster homes, through 3 jobs during college, through building a billion-dollar company from nothing. I love your son. I do not care about your money or your status. I just want to build a life with him. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass, sharp and cruel and designed to draw blood. Oh, you will care about money, sweetheart. You will care very much when you realize you are not getting any of it. She turned toward Ashley, gesturing for her to step forward. Come here, darling. Let me introduce you properly. Ashley moved to stand beside Victoria, one hand still resting on her pregnant belly. Her smile was sharp as a blade, triumphant and cruel. This is Ashley Summers. She is carrying the real Harrison heir. She and Marcus have been together for 2 years. You were just a phase. A little rebellion against everything we represent. A temporary amusement. It is over now. I looked at Marcus, desperate for him to deny it, for him to say this was some terrible joke, for him to step forward and protect me, defend me, choose me. He would not meet my eyes. Marcus. I could hear my voice breaking. Tell me this is not true. Tell me she is lying. Silence stretched between us like a wound that would never heal. Then finally, quietly, without any emotion at all, he spoke. I am sorry, Elena. I do care about you, but Ashley is my future. This was always going to end. What came next was designed to break me completely, to destroy not just my marriage, but my dignity, my sense of self, my will to fight back. Victoria produced a stack of papers from her designer handbag. Divorce documents. I recognized the format from my business dealings, though I had never expected to see them in this context. Sign these, and you can walk out of here with your dignity intact. She set them on the coffee table with a decisive snap. Refuse, and my husband will make sure you never work again in this state. He knows every judge, every hiring manager who matters, every landlord who wants to stay in his good graces. My hands were shaking, but somewhere deep inside me, some stubborn part that had survived everything life had thrown at me refused to simply surrender. I need a lawyer to review these first. My voice was steadier than I expected. I am not signing anything without legal counsel. Victoria's face twisted with something that might have been respect in a different situation, but was clearly just irritation at my continued resistance. She stepped forward and slapped the papers from my hands. They scattered across the floor like dead leaves. You need nothing. You are nothing. You have nothing. She walked to the bedroom closet and returned carrying my wedding dress, the one I had saved for months to buy, back when I was still pretending to be poor, the one I had worn just 6 months ago, believing I was finally home, finally safe, finally loved. This is what you came here with. Dreams above your station, fantasies about belonging somewhere you could never belong. She produced a pair of scissors from her purse. I realized with a sick feeling that she had planned this. Every moment, every humiliation, she had brought those scissors from home, knowing exactly what she intended to do with them. The first cut tore through the bodice of the dress. The fabric made a sound like a scream. I lunged forward to stop her, but Richard grabbed my arms from behind. His grip was painful, his fingers digging into my flesh hard enough to leave bruises. "Kneel," he said. His voice was calm, almost pleasant, like he was asking me to pass the salt. "What? On your knees. Now. Or I make one phone call, and you will be arrested for theft before midnight. I have evidence that you have been stealing from my son for months. Fabricated, of course, but the charges will stick long enough to destroy you completely." I had no choice, or rather, I could not see any choice in that moment. They had planned this too well, anticipated every response, blocked every exit. I knelt on the cold marble floor of my own living room. Victoria continued cutting, piece by piece, strip by strip. My wedding dress fell around me like snow, like confetti at a funeral, like the death of every dream I had ever had about love and family and belonging. Ashley laughed from somewhere behind me. "Oh my God, this is pathetic. Marcus, can we please leave now? I am getting tired." Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "Just sign the papers, Elena. Please do not make this harder than it needs to be." I looked up and saw Courtney in the corner, crying silently. She mouthed two words through her tears. "I am sorry." I signed the divorce papers. What choice did I have? They did not know about my money, and I was too shocked to think strategically, too broken to fight, too devastated to do anything except survive the next moment, and the next, and the next. The instant my signature touched the paper, my phone started buzzing, then buzzing again. Then it would not stop. Email after email, text after text, the coordinated destruction of everything I had built in my public life. My part-time teaching job at the community college terminated. Budget cuts, they claimed. I would later learn that one of Richard's golf buddies sat on the college's board of directors. One phone call was all it took. My apartment lease terminated, effective immediately. The building had been sold. Richard had purchased it that very morning, just to have the pleasure of throwing me out onto the street. My bank accounts, frozen pending a fraud investigation, completely fabricated, of course, but bureaucratically effective. It would take months to untangle. Months I did not have. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Every move calculated, every exit blocked, every safety net cut away. Victoria poured herself a glass of red wine from our bar, the same wine Marcus and I had drunk on our wedding night, toasting to our future together. She walked over to where I still knelt, surrounded by the shredded ruins of my wedding dress, and poured the entire glass over my head. The wine was cold. It dripped down my face, mixed with my tears, soaked into what remained of the white fabric, staining it red. The color of blood, the color of anger, the color of the revenge I did not yet know I would take. "There," Victoria said, setting down the empty glass. "Now you look like what you are." She turned to leave, then paused at the door and looked back at me one final time. "Oh, and Elena, do not bother trying to contact my son. The restraining order will be filed by morning. If you come within 500 feet of any member of this family, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" I could not speak, could barely breathe. "Good." Victoria smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "This meeting is concluded. You will be out of this apartment within the hour. Security will ensure you take nothing that does not belong to you, which, as we have established, is everything." They left. All of them. Marcus did not look back, not once, not even for a second. I knelt there for a long time after they were gone, wine dripping, dress destroyed, marriage over, future gone, or so they thought. Because what Victoria Harrison did not know, what none of them knew, was that she had just made the worst mistake of her life. She had humiliated a woman who had survived things that would have broken most people. She had attacked someone who had built an empire from nothing once before and could do it again. She had made me kneel. She would learn what that cost. I walked out of that apartment with nothing but the clothes on my back, a garbage bag full of ruined wedding dress, $83 in cash, and a dying phone battery. I also had a secret that none of them knew about, a positive pregnancy test hidden in my purse. A tiny life growing inside me that I had planned to announce with joy and had instead discovered in the middle of my own destruction. You might be wondering why I did not simply reveal who I really was in that moment. Why I did not pull out my phone and show them my NovaMind board credentials. Why I did not laugh in their faces and tell them that I was worth 40 times their pathetic hotel empire. The truth is complicated. First, I was in shock. Complete, devastating shock. The kind that makes your brain stop working properly. That reduces you to pure survival instinct. I could not think clearly enough to strategize. Second, Richard's fabricated fraud investigation had flagged my identity across multiple financial systems. Unfreezing my accounts would require legal battles, court appearances, weeks or months of fighting through bureaucratic red tape. It would mean revealing everything publicly, going through a scandal that would shake the tech world, exposing my double life in the worst possible way. And third, some part of me, some stubborn and perhaps foolish part, did not want to win that way. I did not want to simply overwhelm them with money. I wanted them to suffer. I wanted them to believe they had won, to feel safe in their cruelty, and then I wanted to watch their faces when they realized what they had done. But that came later. In that moment, walking out into the cold night air, with wine still drying in my hair, I could only focus on survival. I drove to the only place I could think of, a small bakery in my old neighborhood, run by a woman named Rosa Martinez, who had been kind to me when I volunteered at the church food bank. I parked my car in the alley, behind her building, because I had nowhere else to go. And for 3 days, that car was my home. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I want you to understand something. I had been poor before. I had grown up with nothing. I had slept in places far worse than the back seat of a Honda Civic. But there is a difference between poverty you are born into and poverty that is inflicted upon you. There is a different kind of despair that comes from having everything taken away. During the day, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I showered at the YMCA, paying with the dwindling cash in my pocket. I ate at the church food bank, accepting the same kind of help I used to provide. I watched my phone die because I had nowhere safe to charge it. I could have gone to Diane Crawford, my friend and fellow board member at NovaMind. She would have helped me instantly. She would have given me money, a place to stay, an army of lawyers to fight the Harrisons, but I could not bring myself to make that call. Not yet. I was too ashamed, too broken, too convinced that somehow this was all my fault, that I had been stupid to trust Marcus, stupid to believe in love, stupid to think I deserved happiness. Every night I curled up in the back seat of my car and tried not to cry. I talked to the baby, even though she was barely the size of a raspberry, even though she could not hear me, even though I was not even sure I would be able to keep her safe. I know this is not what I promised you, I whispered into the darkness. I was supposed to give you a family, a home, everything I never had. But I am going to figure this out. I am going to build something for us, even if I have to start from nothing all over again. Starting from nothing was something I knew how to do. When I was 7 years old and my parents died in a car accident, leaving me with no relatives willing to take me in, I had started from nothing. When I bounced between 17 foster homes in 11 years, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe, I had learned to rebuild myself over and over again. When I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state college on scholarships and determination, sleeping 4 hours a night and studying on my breaks, I had proven that I could survive anything. When I built Novamind AI from a laptop in a studio apartment, teaching myself to code and then teaching myself to lead, and then teaching myself to dominate an industry, I had shown that nothing could keep me down. The Harrisons had reminded me of something I had temporarily forgotten. They had reminded me that the only person you can truly count on is yourself. But sometimes, if you are very lucky, the universe sends you people who prove that theory wrong. On the fourth morning, at 4:47 in the morning, I woke to a gentle tapping on my car window. Rosa Martinez stood there in her bakery apron, her face creased with concern. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and hands that had kneaded thousands of loaves of bread over the decades. Her husband had died 15 years ago, leaving her to raise 4 children alone. She had turned that bakery into her life's work, and in the process, she had become a quiet pillar of the neighborhood. I had met Rosa through my volunteer work at Pastor James's church. She donated day-old bread to the food bank every week, and she always stayed to help serve it. We had talked sometimes, nothing deep, just the casual conversation of 2 women who both knew what it meant to work hard. She had no idea who I really was. To her, I was just Elena, the quiet woman who showed up every Saturday morning to ladle soup and hand out bread. She gestured for me to roll down the window. Mija. Her voice was soft with concern. How long have you been out here? I was too tired to lie. 3 days. Why did you not come to me? The question cracked something open inside me. Tears I had been holding back for 72 hours finally spilled over. I was embarrassed, ashamed. I did not want to be a burden. I did not want to be a burden. I have nothing to offer you, nothing to give in return. Rosa opened my car door and took my hands. Her grip was warm and strong, calloused from years of work, but gentle in a way that made me want to cry harder. You think I helped you at the food bank because of what you could offer me? You think kindness is a transaction? She pulled me out of that car, wrapped her arm around my shoulders, and walked me into her bakery. The smell hit me immediately. Warm bread and yeast and something sweet baking in the ovens. It smelled like safety, like home. She sat me down at a small table in the back, the one she used for paperwork and breaks and feeding strays like me. She made me eat a warm croissant and drink strong coffee while the sun came up outside. You will work mornings with me, she said, 4 in the morning until 11. You will eat 3 meals a day. You will sleep in the room upstairs, the one my son used before he moved away. And when you are ready, only when you are ready, you will tell me what happened to you. I could not speak. I could only nod and cry into my coffee, while this woman I barely knew offered me everything. Rosa, I finally managed, why are you doing this? You do not know me. You do not know anything about me. She smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way that Victoria Harrison's smile never had. I know you show up every Saturday. I know you look the homeless people in the eye when you serve them, which most volunteers do not do. I know you always stay late to help clean up even when nobody asks you to. She paused, and I know what it looks like when a woman has been broken by people who are supposed to love her. I have seen that look before, in the mirror. I would learn later that Rosa's daughter Maria had been in an abusive marriage. That Rosa had watched her child suffer and had not known how to help. That Maria had died 3 years ago under circumstances Rosa still could not bring herself to discuss. I would learn that in helping me, Rosa was trying to save the daughter she had not been able to save before. But in that moment, all I knew was that a stranger had offered me grace when I had nothing to give in return. And that gift would change everything. That night, after Rosa had shown me to the small room upstairs, after I had showered and eaten and slept for a few hours, I finally found the courage to charge my phone and make a call. Diane Crawford answered on the second ring. "Elena, thank God." Her voice was tight with worry. "I have been trying to reach you for 3 days. What happened? Where are you?" I told her everything. The ambush, the humiliation, the divorce papers signed under duress, the coordinated destruction of my public identity, the frozen accounts, the fabricated fraud charges, and the pregnancy, the baby growing inside me that I had not told anyone about except the baby herself. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Richard Harrison is a snake," Diane finally said. "I have heard stories about him for years, but he is a snake who has no idea what he stepped on. They think they destroyed me. They think I am nobody. Then we let them keep thinking that. For now, because they do not know about Nova Mind. They do not know who you really are, and that means you still have options." I looked around the tiny room Rosa had given me. A single bed with clean sheets, a small window overlooking the alley, a life that had shrunk to almost nothing. "I am pregnant, Diane. Whatever happens next, it is not just about me anymore. I have someone else to protect." Diane's voice softened. "Then you have everything that matters, and we are going to get everything else back. I promise you that." I believed her. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than despair. I felt the beginning of hope. That night, lying in that narrow bed with one hand on my belly, I made a decision that would shape everything that followed. I was not going to simply reveal who I was and crush the Harrisons with money. That would be easy. That would be quick. That would give them the satisfaction of knowing they had driven me to desperation. Number 1, I was going to wait. I was going to let them believe they had won. I was going to watch their lives from the shadows while I gathered evidence of every crime they had ever committed. And when the moment was exactly right, when their confidence was highest and their defenses were lowest, I was going to burn their world to the ground. They had made me kneel in my own living room. They had destroyed my wedding dress piece by piece while I watched. They had poured wine over my head and called me trash. They would learn what it cost to underestimate someone who had nothing left to lose. The smell of bread became my salvation. Every morning at 3:30, my alarm went off in the small room above Rosa's bakery. By 4, I was downstairs in the warm kitchen, learning how to make bread. Rosa was patient with me, showing me how to measure flour and water, how to knead dough until it was smooth and elastic, how to shape loaves, how to know when the oven was exactly the right temperature. Working with my hands helped quiet my mind. There is something almost meditative about bread making, something ancient and grounding. The way the dough transforms under your fingers from a shaggy mess into something smooth and alive. The smell of yeast activating, creating tiny bubbles of potential. The satisfaction of pulling a perfect golden loaf from the oven and knowing that you made something good. Rosa and I did not talk much during those early morning hours. We did not need to. She had somehow understood that what I needed was not advice or sympathy or questions about what had happened to me. What I needed was purpose, a reason to get out of bed when every cell in my body wanted to give up and disappear. The bakery opened at 6. From 6 to 11, I worked the counter, serving coffee and pastries, to the regulars who had been coming to Rose's place for decades. They accepted me without question, the way small communities accept anyone who shows up and does the work. I was just the new girl helping Rosa. That was all they needed to know. By 11, my bakery shift was over. I would shower, change into slightly nicer clothes, and transform into my second self, the one who was planning revenge. Diane arranged for me to meet Malcolm Webb at a coffee shop on the other side of the city, far from any place the Harrisons or their associates might frequent. Malcolm was in his early 40s, with graying hair at his temples and eyes that had seen too much injustice to be surprised by anything. He had built his career as a civil rights attorney, specializing in cases that other lawyers considered unwinnable. He had a reputation for taking down powerful people who thought they were untouchable. He also had a personal connection to Richard Harrison that made him exactly the right person for what I needed. "Tell me about Judge Harrison," Malcolm said after we had settled into a corner booth with our coffees. "Tell me what you know that is not in the public record." I thought carefully before answering. I had only been married to Marcus for 6 months, but I had observed a great deal during that time. The whispered phone calls Richard took in private, the way certain judges seemed to defer to him at social events, the fear in Courtney's eyes whenever her father raised his voice. I think he has been bribing court officials for years, judges, clerks, prosecutors. I think his hotel empire is not as successful as he pretends, and he has been hiding the true financial state of the business from everyone, including his own family. And I think he has destroyed other women before me. Malcolm's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "What makes you think that?" The way Victoria orchestrated my humiliation, it was too smooth, too practiced, like she had done it before and knew exactly how to break someone. And something Marcus's sister Courtney said about their father's first wife, a woman named Linda. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a folder he had brought and pulled out a photograph. A woman, maybe 35, with sad eyes and a tired smile. Linda Harrison, Richard's first wife, Marcus's biological mother. I studied the photograph, feeling an unexpected kinship with this woman I had never met. What happened to her? She was committed to a psychiatric facility when Marcus was 3 years old. Richard and Victoria claimed she was mentally unstable, a danger to herself and others. Unfit to be a mother. She lost custody of both her children, Marcus and his older brother David. I did not know Marcus had an older brother. David has not spoken to the Harrison family in over 20 years. After what they did to his mother, he changed his name and disappeared completely. I have been trying to locate him for years. And Linda, she was released from the psychiatric facility after 6 months. 3 months later, she drove her car off a bridge. It was officially ruled an accident. But you do not believe that. Malcolm shook his head slowly. I believe Richard Harrison drove that woman to take her own life, just like he has driven others to ruin over the years. He uses his legal connections like weapons, destroying anyone who gets in his way. He did it to Linda. He tried to do it to you. And if someone does not stop him, he will keep doing it forever. I leaned forward. You said you have been trying to locate David for years. How long have you been building a case against Richard Harrison? Malcolm met my eyes. 10 years, ever since he put one of my clients in prison for a crime he did not commit. Tell me. The story Malcolm told me was infuriating. His client, a young man named Jerome Wilson, had been accused of robbing a convenience store. The evidence was shaky, the eyewitness identification unreliable, but Richard Harrison had been the presiding judge. He had manipulated the trial from start to finish, coaching the prosecution, excluding defense evidence, giving jury instructions designed to guarantee conviction. Jerome Wilson spent 7 years in prison before DNA evidence finally exonerated him. By then, he had lost his job, his apartment, his girlfriend. His mother had died while he was incarcerated, and he had not been allowed to attend the funeral. Richard Harrison faced no consequences. He had already retired from the bench by the time Jerome was exonerated, living comfortably on his hotel fortune and his reputation as a distinguished former jurist. "I have been waiting for the right moment," Malcolm said. "The right evidence, the right person brave enough to stand up to him. Elena, I think you might be that person." I thought about the tiny life growing inside me, about the world I wanted her to inherit, about the kind of mother I wanted to be. "I am definitely that person," I said. "What do I need to do?" Over the following weeks, Diane, Malcolm, and I built our strategy piece by piece. The first priority was accessing my money without revealing my identity publicly. The NovaMind board held an emergency session via secure video conference. I explained that I was dealing with a personal matter that required discretion. I did not go into details about the Harrisons, but Diane had already briefed the other board members privately. Within 72 hours, I had access to a $10 million personal fund that could not be traced back to my public identity. It was routed through a series of shell companies, completely legal but completely anonymous. The second priority was intelligence gathering. We hired the best private investigators money could buy, people who specialized in uncovering the secrets of the wealthy and powerful. They began digging into every corner of the Harrison family's life. What they found was worse than I had imagined. Marcus and Ashley's relationship had indeed started 2 years before Marcus met me. But here was the first twist. DNA analysis from a discarded coffee cup proved that Ashley's baby was not Marcus's. The real father was her personal trainer, a married man named Derek, who had no idea he was about to become a father. Ashley had been playing the same game I had been playing, hiding her true self to get what she wanted. The difference was that her deception was designed to trap a wealthy man into marriage, while mine had been designed to find genuine love. Victoria's charity foundation, the one she used to burnish her reputation as a philanthropist and a community leader, was missing $2.3 million. She had been embezzling from her own organization for years, funneling the money into private accounts, using charitable donations to fund her designer wardrobe and luxury vacations. Richard's judicial bribery went back more than 2 decades. At least 3 people were currently serving prison sentences for crimes they did not commit, all because Richard had manipulated their trials. One of them was Malcolm's client, Jerome. Another was a woman who had refused Richard's advances 20 years ago. The third was a business competitor who had been threatening to expose Harrison Luxury Group's financial problems, and those financial problems were more severe than anyone knew. Harrison Luxury Group was not just struggling, it was drowning. $18 million in debt, hemorrhaging clients, 6 months away from bankruptcy. Richard had been hiding the true state of the business from everyone, including his own wife and children. "They are rotting from the inside," I said during one of our strategy sessions. "We barely have to do anything. Their empire is built on sand, and the tide is coming in." Diane shook her head. "That is not enough. You want them to know it was you. You want them to understand exactly who they tried to destroy." She was right. I did not just want the Harrisons to fall. I wanted them to know that the woman they had called nobody, the woman they had made kneel, was the one who had ended everything. While my investigators were gathering intelligence, I continued living my double life. Mornings at the bakery with Rosa, teaching her regular customers to trust me, learning her recipes, watching the sun rise through flower-dusted windows. Evenings at the community church with Pastor James Williams. He ran a small congregation, nothing fancy, just good people trying to help each other through hard times. I started attending services with Rosa, not because I was particularly religious, but because I needed something to anchor me through the darkness. Pastor James was a former corporate lawyer who had walked away from a lucrative career to serve the community. He said he got tired of using his skills to help rich people get richer and wanted to use them to help poor people survive. Now he spent his days running a food bank, counseling struggling families, and preaching sermons about grace and justice and the power of new beginnings. One Sunday after the service, he approached me. "Rosa tells me you are going through a difficult season." I gave him a careful answer. "I am working through some challenges." He nodded. "She also tells me you are pregnant. Congratulations." "Thank you." I put my hand on my belly, which was just starting to show at 16 weeks. It was not planned, but she is the best thing that ever happened to me. Pastor James smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that felt genuine. There is no greater hope than new life. Whatever you are facing, whatever battles you are fighting, that child is proof that the future exists. She is proof that something good can come from even the darkest circumstances. I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. "Can I ask you something, Pastor?" "Of course." "How do you know when you are doing the right thing?" "When you are fighting against something evil, but the fighting itself requires you to do things that feel wrong?" Pastor James was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think the question is not whether the fighting feels wrong. Sometimes justice is uncomfortable. Sometimes it requires us to be harder than we want to be. The question is what you are building. When the fight is over, when you have won or lost, what will be left? What will your child inherit?" I thought about that question for days afterward. I was still thinking about it when I fell asleep each night, one hand resting on my growing belly. What was I building? A world where the Harrisons could never hurt anyone again. A world where men, like Richard, could not use their power to destroy the women who got in their way. A world where my daughter would never have to kneel for anyone. That seemed like something worth fighting for. By week 20 of my pregnancy, our investigation had assembled a devastating portfolio of evidence. Financial records proving Richard's judicial bribery going back 2 decades. Bank statements showing Victoria's charity embezzlement. Documentation of at least 3 wrongful convictions that Richard had engineered. A detailed timeline of the coordinated campaign to destroy me, including evidence that Richard had purchased my apartment building specifically to evict me and had orchestrated the fabricated fraud investigation that had frozen my bank accounts. I could have ended the Harrisons that day. One press release, one call to the FBI, one story leaked to an investigative journalist with a grudge against the wealthy and powerful. But I wanted more than their destruction. I wanted their complete annihilation. I wanted them to come to me, begging, and discover too late who they were dealing with. So I began to apply pressure, quietly, anonymously. The death of 1,000 cuts. I sent an anonymous letter to Harrison Luxury Group's biggest creditor, a bank that had been carrying their largest loan for over a decade. The letter contained detailed documentation of the company's true financial state, information that Richard had been carefully hiding from everyone. Within 2 weeks, the bank called in a $5 million loan. They wanted their money now, not later. I made sure that Harrison Hotels started losing contracts. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be traced back to me. Just a quiet word here, a rumor there. Did you know Harrison Luxury Group is in financial trouble? Did you hear that Richard Harrison might be under investigation for judicial corruption? Have you considered taking your business somewhere more stable? 3 major clients canceled their contracts within a month. I ensured that inspectors actually showed up at Harrison Properties. Health inspectors, fire safety inspectors, building code inspectors. For years, Richard had been using his connections to avoid scrutiny. Now suddenly, every minor violation was being documented and reported. their flagship hotel, failed a health inspection, nothing that would make the news, but enough to spook their remaining clients. The Harrison empire was crumbling, and they had no idea who was pushing it over. Week 24. My belly was now unmistakably pregnant, round and firm beneath the loose dresses I wore to hide it. I had not told anyone except Rosa, Diane, Malcolm, and Pastor James. The baby was my secret, my hope, my reason for fighting. Richard Harrison was getting desperate. His hotel company was hemorrhaging money. His connections were starting to fail him. His wife was asking questions about their finances that he did not want to answer. He reached out to tech investors, looking for a white knight to save his sinking company. Someone willing to pump money into Harrison Luxury Group in exchange for equity and a chance to turn things around. One name kept coming up in the venture capital community: Nova Mind AI. They had a board member who specialized in distressed acquisitions, someone who had made a fortune buying failing companies for pennies on the dollar and turning them into gold. That board member was me. Richard Harrison requested a meeting with Novamind to discuss a potential partnership. He had no idea who he was about to face. I prepared for that meeting like I was preparing for war. I bought a red power suit, the exact color of the wine Victoria had poured over my head. I got my hair done professionally for the first time in months, styled in a way that projected power and confidence. I practiced my boardroom face in the mirror until I could look cold and commanding without flinching. The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 10. On Sunday, I went to see Pastor James. He listened as I explained what I was about to do. Not the specifics, not the details of my plan, but the broad strokes. I was going to confront the people who had hurt me. I was going to reveal who I really was. I was going to watch their faces as they realized the woman they had called worthless was worth more than they could ever imagine. "You have the power to destroy them now," Pastor James said. "The question is, what will that make you?" I thought about his question carefully before answering. "I am not destroying them for revenge, Pastor. I am stopping them from hurting anyone else. Richard has put innocent people in prison. Victoria steals from charity. They drove Marcus's birth mother to take her own life. They raised a son who throws women away like garbage. If I do not stop them, who will?" Pastor James nodded slowly. "Just remember what we discussed. You are building a world for your daughter to live in. Make sure it is a world you are proud of. Make sure you can look her in the eye someday and tell her what you did and why." I promised him I would remember. I meant it. Monday morning, the Novamind building. I arrived at 8:30 and took my place at the head of the conference table on the 47th floor. The windows behind me offered a stunning view of the city, morning sunlight streaming in like a spotlight. Diane sat to my right. Malcolm sat to my left. Behind us stood 3 more attorneys in matching dark suits, silent and intimidating. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my mind. I knew exactly what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, when I would pause for effect. This was not just a confrontation. It was a performance, the most important performance of my life. At exactly 10 o'clock, my assistant showed the Harrisons in. Richard came first, looking around the sleek modern office with barely concealed desperation. His suit was expensive, but slightly rumpled, like he had not been sleeping well. "Good?" Victoria followed, her designer outfit a thin armor against the fear in her eyes. She was clutching her Hermes bag like a weapon or a shield. Marcus brought up the rear, nervous and uncertain, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. They did not recognize me at first. I was silhouetted against the windows, the light behind me making my features difficult to distinguish. And besides, Why would they expect to see me here? They had destroyed Elena Mitchell, the nobody, the charity case, the gold digger. They had no idea that Elena Mitchell and Elena Sterling were the same person. Thank you for coming, I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral. Please have a seat. They sat. Richard immediately pulled out a folder and launched into his pitch without really looking at me. We appreciate Novamind's interest in Harrison Luxury Group. As you can see from these projected figures, we are positioned for significant growth in the boutique hotel market over the next 5 years. With the right partnership and capital infusion, we believe we can... He finally looked up, really looked at me. The sunlight shifted, illuminating my face fully. His expression went through several stages in rapid succession, confusion, as his brain tried to reconcile what he was seeing with what he expected. Recognition, as he placed my features. Disbelief, as he realized the impossible. And finally, dawning horror, as he understood what this meeting really was. Hello, Richard. I smiled, and it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who has finally cornered her prey. It is so lovely to see you again. Victoria gasped. Her hand flew to her chest in what looked like genuine cardiac distress. What is this? What kind of sick joke? No joke, Victoria. I leaned forward, letting them see me clearly for the first time. Just business. Marcus had gone pale as milk. His mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. Elena? But you. We thought you were... How is this? You thought I was what? That I was destroyed? That I was broken? That I had crawled away to die somewhere like a wounded animal? I stood up and walked slowly around the table, letting my heels click on the marble floor with each step. They watched me like mice watching a cat, frozen with fear. Let me tell you a story, I said. 9 years ago, a young woman who had grown up with nothing, who had survived foster care and poverty and every disadvantage the world could throw at her, built an artificial intelligence company from scratch. She sold that company for $800 million and retained 15% equity. Today, that company is worth $21 billion. Today, that woman is worth $3.2 billion. I stopped directly behind Richard's chair, close enough that he could feel my presence looming over him. Today, that woman is standing in front of the family that made her kneel on her own floor while they destroyed her wedding dress. Richard's voice came out strangled. This is impossible. We investigated you. You were nobody, a foster kid, a part-time teacher. I was all of those things. I was also the anonymous founder of Novamind AI. I was also the silent board member who handles distressed asset acquisitions. And I was also, as of last week, the owner of every single dollar of debt that Harrison Luxury Group owes. I walked back to my chair and sat down, pulling a folder from the stack in front of me. $18 million, Richard, due in 30 days. If you cannot pay, I foreclose on everything. Your hotels, your homes, your cars, everything. Victoria was crying now, real tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. This cannot be happening. This cannot be real. Oh, it is very real, Victoria. I slid another folder across the table. And that is not even the interesting part. The interesting part is what my investigators found when they started digging into your family's history. I opened the folder so they could see the contents. Bank records, phone records, photographs, documents with Richard's signature on them. 20 years of judicial bribery. 3 innocent people currently in prison because of trials you manipulated. $2.3 million embezzled from your charity foundation. Victoria, and let us not forget, what you did to Linda." Richard's face went gray at the mention of his first wife's name. "I do not know what you think you know about Linda. I know everything." I stood up again, unable to contain my energy. "I know you had her committed to a psychiatric facility when she tried to divorce you. I know you took her children and turned them against her. I know you destroyed her so completely that she drove her car off a bridge." "That was an accident," Victoria said automatically, the words sounding rehearsed. "It was murder. Maybe not legally. Maybe you did not hold the steering wheel, but you killed her just as surely as if you had pushed her yourself, and you were planning to do the same thing to me." I let that sink in for a moment. The only difference is that I am not Linda. I have resources she did not have. I have evidence she could not gather, and I have absolutely no intention of letting you destroy me or anyone else ever again. Richard found his voice. "What do you want? Money? We can make a deal. Everyone has a price." I laughed. It was not a pleasant laugh. "You tried to destroy me because you thought I wanted your money. The irony is that I have more money than you could imagine. I could buy your entire empire with what I spend on coffee in a year. I do not want your money, Richard. I want your complete and total destruction." The meeting was over. There was nothing left to say. "My lawyers will be in touch," I said. 30 days, Richard. That is how long you have to save everything you have built. I suggest you start making phone calls." I turned and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back one final time. "Oh, and Victoria? The next time you feel like pouring wine on someone's head, you might want to Google them first." I walked out. I wish I could tell you that was the end of the story. That I walked out of that building victorious, that the Harrisons crumbled immediately, that justice was swift and complete. But life is not that simple, and the Harrisons had not survived this long by giving up at the first sign of trouble. For 6 beautiful days, I allowed myself to believe I had won. I bought baby furniture for the first time, a crib with a mobile of stars, a changing table painted soft yellow, a rocking chair where I could sit and feed her. I set up a nursery in a new apartment I purchased anonymously. I painted the walls and hung pictures and imagined the life I would build for my daughter. I told Hope that everything was going to be okay now, that we had won. I should have known better. The Harrisons had one more card to play, and when they played it, everything fell apart. 2 days before I was supposed to receive the Harrisons' response to my ultimatum, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Elena." Malcolm's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "We have a problem, a serious problem." I was sitting in the nursery I had been preparing, surrounded by baby clothes I had been folding. The mobile above the empty crib turned slowly, casting star-shaped shadows on the walls. "What kind of problem?" "Someone on our team has been feeding information to Richard Harrison." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That is impossible. We were so careful." "It is the forensic accountant we hired, Thomas Mercer. Richard paid him $500,000 to copy our strategy documents and report back on everything we were planning." I thought about all the meetings Mercer had attended, all the documents he had reviewed, all the secrets he now had access to. How much does Richard know? He knows you are the Novamind board member. He knows about the debt acquisition. He knows about the investigation into his judicial bribery. My heart was pounding. What about the evidence? Does he know how much we have? Malcolm paused. "We think so. We think Mercer copied everything before we identified him as the leak." I closed my eyes, trying to think through the implications. If Richard knew what we had, he could prepare countermeasures. He could destroy evidence. He could intimidate witnesses. He could use his connections to block any investigation before it started. "There is one silver lining," Malcolm continued. Richard does not know how wealthy you actually are. He thinks you have maybe 10 or 20 million dollars. A nuisance, not an existential threat. He does not understand what he is really dealing with. That was something, at least. But it was not enough. What is he going to do? I do not know yet, but I think we are about to find out. Richard struck within 48 hours. The first blow came in the form of legal papers. A judge, who was clearly in Richard's pocket, issued an emergency restraining order claiming I had been stalking and harassing the Harrison family. The order prohibited me from going within 500 feet of any Harrison family member, their homes, or their businesses. The second blow was worse. Tabloid stories started appearing on celebrity gossip websites and social media. Jilted ex-wife's disturbing obsession with former in-laws. The headlines painted me as a mentally unstable woman who had been dumped by her wealthy husband and was now pursuing a vendetta against his innocent family. The stories included photographs of me outside Harrison properties, taken by private investigators and presented out of context. Me walking past their flagship hotel, actually on my way to a meeting with Malcolm. Me parked outside their mansion, actually waiting for traffic to clear on the busy street. Each image twisted to support the narrative that I was dangerous. The third blow was devastating. Richard's lawyers filed a motion in family court arguing that I was mentally unstable and should not have unsupervised custody of my baby when she was born. They cited my obsessive behavior, my erratic actions, my history of deception. They requested that the court appoint a guardian for my unborn child and restrict my parental rights. They were trying to take my daughter before she was even born. I was 26 weeks pregnant when I read that custody motion, sitting at Rosa's kitchen table, feeling my daughter kick for the first time. And I read the words, "The respondent has exhibited erratic and obsessive behavior consistent with serious mental illness. For the protection of the unborn child, we request that the court appoint a guardian and restrict the respondent's parental rights pending a full psychiatric evaluation." The papers fell from my shaking hands. They cannot do this. Rosa picked up the motion and read it, her face darkening with anger. They have no evidence, no proof. This is lies. They do not need evidence. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. They have connections. They have judges. They have 20 years of practice destroying women who get in their way. Diane arrived within the hour. Malcolm followed. We gathered around Rosa's tiny kitchen table, the same table where she had fed me croissants and coffee on the morning she saved my life and tried to figure out what to do. "This is Richard's playbook," Diane said grimly. "He did exactly the same thing to Marcus's birth mother, declared her mentally unfit, took custody of her children, destroyed her completely." "She did not survive it," Malcolm added quietly. I felt sick. The walls seemed to be closing in around me. Is that what he is going to do to me? Is he going to take my baby and destroy me until I drive off a bridge? No. Malcolm's voice was firm. Because you are not Linda. You have resources she did not have. You have documentation she could not gather. And you have people fighting for you who are not going to let this happen. But we need to be smart about this, Diane added. Richard has clearly decided to go nuclear. He is not trying to negotiate or make deals anymore. He is trying to destroy you completely. Which means we need to escalate too, Malcolm said. No. I put my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter move. Not yet. Not like this. They both looked at me with concern. Elena, if we do not fight back... I know. But right now, the only thing that matters is her. I pressed my palm against the place where my daughter was kicking. If the stress of this fight hurts her, if something happens to my baby, then they have already won, no matter what happens to the Harrisons afterward. I looked at Malcolm. How bad is the custody motion? Really, be honest with me. Malcolm considered his words carefully. The judge assigned to the case is one of Richard's old colleagues, not directly on his payroll, as far as we know, but sympathetic to him. If Richard pushes hard enough, he could potentially get a temporary order restricting your parental rights pending evaluation. My heart clenched. And then what? Then you would have to prove you are fit to be a mother, undergo psychiatric examination, fight for custody of your own child, like Linda did. Malcolm nodded slowly. Like Linda did. I made my decision in that moment. For the next few weeks, I was going to step back, let my lawyers handle the legal battles, focus on staying healthy, keeping my blood pressure down, protecting my daughter. The revenge could wait. My baby could not. That night, alone in my room above the bakery, I wrote a letter to my unborn daughter. Dear Hope, I want you to know that I chose you. In the hardest moment of my life, when I had the chance to fight the people who hurt me or protect you, I chose you without hesitation. There are people in this world who want to take you away from me before you are even born. They think they can destroy me like they have destroyed other women. They think their money and power make them untouchable. They are wrong, but proving them wrong will have to wait. Right now, my only job is keeping you safe, growing you strong, making sure you come into this world healthy and loved and protected. Everything else, the revenge, the justice, the reckoning, that can wait. You are worth waiting for. Love, your mom. I folded the letter and put it in a box with the other things I was saving for her. Ultrasound pictures, the tiny yellow baby shoes I had bought on the day everything fell apart, a photograph of Rosa holding up a loaf of bread, grinning at the camera, evidence of hope in the middle of darkness. The next several weeks were the hardest of my life. My doctor put me on modified bed rest at week 28. My blood pressure was too high. The stress was affecting the baby's growth. I needed to rest, stay calm, avoid anything that might trigger the fight or flight response that was keeping my body in constant crisis mode. So I retreated to Rosa's small room above the bakery and tried to let go of my war against the Harrisons. It was almost impossible. Every day brought new bad news. The custody motion was proceeding through the courts despite Malcolm's best efforts to get it dismissed. The tabloid stories were multiplying, each one painting me as more unstable and dangerous than the last. The Harrison family was giving interviews, portraying themselves as innocent victims of a mentally ill woman's vendetta. The Nova Mind board was getting nervous. Shareholders did not like the negative publicity. There were whispered discussions about asking me to step back from my position until the situation resolved. Even my baby was suffering. She was measuring small at every prenatal appointment. The stress hormones, flooding my body, were affecting her development. I lay in that narrow bed for hours every day, watching the ceiling, trying to meditate, trying to stay calm, trying not to think about everything I had lost and everything I might still lose. The walls closed in. The room felt smaller every day. The darkness that had been held at bay by action and purpose now crept back, whispering that maybe the Harrisons were right. Maybe I was nothing. Maybe I deserved to lose. One night at 3 a.m, Rosa found me sitting on the floor of my room, crying. She did not say anything at first. She just sat down beside me on the cold hardwood, wrapped her arm around my shoulders, and let me cry. When the tears finally slowed, she spoke. Do you know why I took you in that morning? Because you are a good person. Rosa shook her head. Because I recognized you, not your face, your eyes. I did not understand. What do you mean? I had a daughter. Her name was Maria. She was brilliant, beautiful, kind. She reminded me so much of you. I knew Rosa had lost a daughter. She had mentioned it briefly once, but she had never told me the details. Maria married a man who seemed perfect at first, charming, successful, from a good family. Rosa's voice was heavy with old pain. But after the wedding, everything changed. He controlled her, isolated her, made her feel like she was nothing without him. What happened to her? Rosa was quiet for a long moment. I told her to be patient, to wait, to not make waves. I was afraid of what he might do if she tried to leave, so I told her to stay and hope things would get better. Did they get better? No. Rosa's voice cracked. They got worse. And one night, she called me crying, saying she could not take it anymore. I told her to hold on, that I was coming to get her. But by the time I got there, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. I am so sorry, Rosa. I did not know. Rosa took my hands in hers. Her grip was strong despite her age. I failed my daughter because I was afraid, because I told her to be quiet and patient and small. I will not make that mistake again. She turned to look me directly in the eyes. You are not nothing, Elena, and I will not let you give up. Not while I still have breath in my body. My daughter did not have anyone to fight for her. But you have me. You have Diane and Malcolm and Pastor James. You have that baby inside you who needs her mother to be strong. Rosa, I whispered, what if I am not strong enough? What if they win? Then we lose fighting. Rosa's voice was fierce now. We lose on our feet, not on our knees. We lose swinging, but we do not give up. Not ever. Giving up is the only way they truly win. She helped me up off the floor and back into bed. She brought me warm milk and sat with me until I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. The despair was still there, lurking in the corners of my mind. But there was something else now too, determination. I was not going to let Richard Harrison do to me what he had done to Linda. I was not going to let my daughter grow up without a mother. I was going to fight. 3 days later, I had an unexpected visitor. Rosa brought her upstairs with a puzzled expression. There is a woman here to see you. She says her name is Courtney Harrison. My heart started pounding. Courtney, Marcus' sister, the only member of his family who had cried at my humiliation, the only one who had seemed genuinely sorry for what was happening. Send her up. Courtney looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Clothes wrinkled, like she had slept in them. She sat down in the chair beside my bed, hands twisting nervously in her lap. She kept glancing toward the door, like she expected someone to burst in at any moment. How did you find me? I hired my own private investigator. She would not meet my eyes. I had to know if you were okay. Why do you care? I did not bother hiding my suspicion. Your family has been trying to destroy me for months. Courtney was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. When I was 15 years old, I found a box in my mother's closet. I waited, not sure where this was going. It was hidden behind her shoes. I thought maybe it was Christmas presents or something, so I opened it. What was inside? Photographs. Courtney's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Photographs of women, their faces. Some crying, some broken, some with that hollow look that comes when you have lost everything. I felt cold suddenly, despite the warm room. Who were they? Women my father destroyed. Women who got in his way over the years. My mother kept them like trophies, proof that she always wins. That is monstrous. I know. Courtney finally looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. I have known for 15 years exactly what my parents are capable of. I have watched them destroy people over and over again, and I have been too scared to do anything about it. So why are you here now? Because of Linda. I felt my pulse quicken at the name. Linda was my father's first wife, Marcus's mother. I never met her, but I found her photograph in that box too. And years later, when I was old enough to understand, I learned what happened to her. What happened to her? Courtney took a deep breath. My mother had her committed to a psychiatric facility, took her children, destroyed her reputation. Linda got out after 6 months, but she was never the same. And 3 months later, she drove her car off a bridge. Courtney nodded. They called it an accident, but I found the note she left, hidden in my father's desk, years later. She wrote that she could not live in a world where people like the Harrisons always won. She wrote that she had nothing left to fight for. I put my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter move. Why are you telling me this? Because when I saw your face at that dinner, when my mother was cutting up your dress and pouring wine on your head, you had the same look Linda had in those photographs. Courtney reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. I have been collecting evidence for 10 years. Bank records showing my father's bribes to judges, documentation of my mother's charity fraud, records of every woman he has destroyed. I have been waiting for someone brave enough to use it. She pressed the flash drive into my hand. In them, Elena, for Linda, for Maria, for all the women they have hurt. In them. With Courtney's evidence, everything changed. The documents she had gathered were explosive. Bank records showing regular payments to judges and court officials, amounts ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 over 20 years. Emails proving Victoria knew about and actively encouraged Richard's witness tampering. Audio recordings of Richard bragging about ruining opponents, describing in detail how he had manipulated trials to ensure guilty verdicts against innocent people. But the most damning evidence was about Linda. Courtney had preserved the commitment papers that Richard had used to have his first wife institutionalized. She had found the doctor who had signed off on the commitment, now retired and racked with guilt, willing to testify that Richard had bribed him to declare Linda mentally incompetent. She had obtained police reports, medical records, psychiatric evaluations that had been buried or falsified. And she had Linda's suicide note, the one Richard had hidden in his desk for 20 years, the one that explicitly blamed him and Victoria for her death. This is enough to put Richard in prison for the rest of his life, Malcolm said, his voice awed, and Victoria, too, depending on how deep her involvement goes. I looked at Courtney, who had stayed to help us organize the evidence. She was pale and shaking, but there was something like relief in her eyes. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked her. They are your parents. There is no going back once this starts. They stopped being my parents a long time ago. Courtney's voice was steady, despite her trembling. They are monsters who wear human faces. And I have a daughter of my own now. Lucy is 4 years old. I want her to grow up in a world where people like my parents do not win. Then let us make that world together. Over the next few weeks, we rebuilt our strategy from the ground up. This time, we were more careful. We used encryption and secure communication channels. We verified everyone on our team personally. We created multiple backups of all evidence, stored in locations that Richard could never find or access. And we began our counterattack. The first move was anonymous tips to federal investigators. The FBI opened an inquiry into Richard's judicial bribery. The IRS began auditing Victoria's charity foundation. The second move was media outreach. Diane connected with investigative journalists who had been trying to crack the Harrison story for years. They began preparing a comprehensive exposé. The third move was completing the debt acquisition. I now owned 100% of Harrison Luxury Group's debt, $18 million that I could call in at any moment. And the fourth move was the most satisfying. We began systematically undermining the Harrisons in ways they could not trace back to us. Richard's judge friends suddenly stopped returning his calls. Victoria's charity board demanded an emergency audit. Harrison Luxury Group lost client after client as rumors spread about their financial instability. And then Ashley's scandal broke. Someone, we never discovered who, leaked to a celebrity gossip blog that Ashley Summers' baby was not Marcus Harrison's. DNA tests confirmed it. The real father was her personal trainer, a married man whose wife immediately filed for divorce. The tabloids that had been painting me as the villain now turned their attention to the Harrisons, the cheaters, the liars. The family whose carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time. Marcus called me 3 weeks into our counterattack. I was lying in bed at Rosa's, 32 weeks pregnant now, feeling my daughter hiccup against my ribs. When I saw his name on my phone, I almost did not answer, but I was curious. "Hello, Marcus." "Elena." His voice was small and desperate, nothing like the cold, detached man who had watched me kneel on our living room floor. "My family is falling apart. Everything is going wrong. Can we please just talk? You can talk to my lawyers. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. I see that now. Ashley was... I was stupid. I was weak. I let my parents control me like they have always controlled me. Please, Elena, just tell me what you want. I will do anything." I thought about all the things I could say, the accusations, the recriminations, the fury that had been building inside me for months. Instead, I said, "I want you to feel exactly what I felt. Powerless, humiliated, alone." I hung up before he could respond. "Elena finally allows herself to hope," Diane said during one of our strategy sessions. "That is what I would write if this were a movie." She was joking, but she was not wrong. For the first time in months, I felt like victory was possible. Not just possible, but inevitable. The Harrisons were crumbling. Their empire was falling. Their secrets were being exposed. I bought baby furniture, real furniture, not secondhand. A crib with a mobile of stars. A changing table painted soft yellow. A rocking chair where I could sit and hold my daughter. I set up a nursery in a new apartment, painted the walls, hung pictures, imagined the life we would build together. I told Hope we had made it, that everything was going to be okay. I should have known that the Harrisons would not go down without one final, desperate fight. At 35 weeks pregnant, Richard Harrison went nuclear. I was sitting in my new apartment, finally feeling safe enough to leave Rosa's tiny room, when Malcolm called. "Elena." His voice was grim. "We have a problem. A big one." "What now?" "It is Courtney. Victoria found out she has been helping us." My blood ran cold. "How?" "We do not know yet, but Victoria moved fast. She had Courtney committed to a psychiatric facility this morning, involuntary 72-hour hold, just like she did to Linda. Exactly like she did to Linda." Malcolm paused. "And there is more." While Courtney was being processed, Richard's people broke into her house. They took Lucy. Victoria has filed for emergency guardianship, claiming Courtney is mentally unstable and unfit to parent. They took her daughter? They are claiming it is for the child's protection. Same playbook they used 20 years ago. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin around me. What about our evidence? Did they find the backups? They destroyed everything at Courtney's house. But she was smart. She had cloud backups they did not know about. So we still have the evidence. We still have the evidence. But Elena, that is not the worst part. How can there be something worse than this? Malcolm took a deep breath. "Richard leaked your identity to the tabloids. The real one. Elena Sterling, secret billionaire. But he spun it as proof that you are a manipulative predator who targeted his vulnerable daughter to destroy an innocent family." The headlines appeared on my phone as Malcolm spoke. I scrolled through them with growing horror. "Billionaire's sick revenge, how Elena Mitchell destroyed a family." The real gold digger, secret fortune revealed. Harrison family speaks out against billionaire stalker. The narrative was devastating. Richard had taken the truth and twisted it into a weapon. Now I was not a victim fighting back against her abuser. I was a billionaire psychopath who had pretended to be poor to trap a wealthy man. And when that failed, I had manipulated his mentally ill sister into betraying her own family. Public opinion shifted overnight. The sympathy I had been building evaporated. My phone exploded with interview requests from outlets that wanted to expose me. The Novamind board called an emergency session. And then, while I was still reeling from all of this, my water broke. 5 weeks early, I called Rosa first, then 911. Within minutes, I was in an ambulance, rushing to the hospital, my body convulsing with contractions that were coming too fast. The stress, one of the paramedics said, it can trigger early labor. I knew he was right. Every moment of fear and anger and despair over the past months had taken its toll. My body had finally reached its breaking point. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Doctors surrounded me, attaching monitors, inserting IVs, shouting numbers that I did not understand. The baby is in distress, someone said, heart rate dropping. We need to do an emergency cesarean now. I was wheeled into surgery alone. Rosa was still on her way. Diane was on a plane. Malcolm was in court. I grabbed the nurse's hand as they prepared to put me under. If something happens to me, I whispered, do not let the Harrisons anywhere near my baby. Promise me. Please, they will try to take her. The nurse squeezed my hand. I promise. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, Rosa was sitting beside my bed, holding a small bundle wrapped in white. She is perfect, mija. Rosa was crying, tears streaming down her weathered face. She is absolutely perfect, she placed my daughter in my arms. 5 pounds, 4 ounces, small but strong, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a face that looked like mine, with Marcus's eyes. I could not speak. I could only hold her and cry and feel the weight of her in my arms and know that somehow, despite everything, I had brought something beautiful into the world. I hope. My voice was barely a whisper. I am your mom. And I promise you, no one will ever make you feel worthless. No one will ever make you kneel. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Not really seeing, I knew. Newborns cannot see clearly. But it felt like she saw me, like she knew me, like she understood. I love you, I told her. I love you more than I have ever loved anything. And I am going to build a world for you where people, like the Harrisons, do not win. I spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from surgery. During that time, the outside world continued to fall apart. The tabloid stories multiplied. My face was everywhere. Elena Mitchell, billionaire or psychopath, the trial that will expose her lies. Harrison family files, restraining order against baby's dangerous mother. The Novamind board met without me and decided to place me on temporary leave pending resolution of my personal issues. They were careful about their language, but the message was clear. I had become a liability. Courtney was released from the psychiatric facility after 72 hours. The evaluation found nothing wrong with her, because there was nothing wrong with her. But by then, Victoria had emergency custody of Lucy. Getting her back would require a court battle that could take months. And Richard's lawyers filed a motion to restrict my custody of Hope, using the same arguments they had been preparing for months. Mentally unstable, dangerous obsession, unfit to parent. But something had changed. I was no longer fighting to win. I was fighting for my daughter, for her future, for the world she would grow up in. And that gave me strength I did not know I had. 3 weeks after giving birth, I convened a meeting of my team. Rose's kitchen. All of us gathered around the tiny table. Diane, Malcolm, Pastor James, Courtney via video call. Hope was sleeping in a carrier beside me, making small snuffling sounds. The Harrisons think they have won, I said. They think they have destroyed us. They think they can take everything. I looked around at the people who had chosen to stand with me. They are wrong. We have Courtney's evidence. We have documentation of every crime they have committed for 20 years. We have proof that Richard bribed judges, that Victoria embezzled from charity, that they destroyed Linda and tried to destroy me. I paused. But if we release this piece by piece, they will find ways to counter each move. They will spin each revelation. They will use their connections to bury the truth. So, what do? Diane asked. Everything at once. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. We release everything simultaneously. The evidence to federal prosecutors, the story to journalists, the debt call to the banks, the custody motions to the courts. All of it on the same day at the same hour. So much coming from so many directions that they cannot possibly respond to all of it. Malcolm nodded slowly. Overwhelming force. Give them no time to prepare countermeasures. Exactly. We have one shot at this. One chance to end them forever. If we do this right, Richard goes to prison. Victoria goes to prison. Their empire collapses. And my daughter grows up in a world where they can never hurt anyone again. When? Courtney asked. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. Everything drops at once. That is in 6 days. Then we have 6 days to get everything ready. I looked at my sleeping daughter. She is worth it. She is worth everything. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. Everything happened at once. The investigative story dropped first. Harrison family, 30 years of corruption. 3 major news outlets ran it simultaneously, each with their own angle. One focused on Richard's judicial bribery. One focused on Victoria's charity fraud. One focused on Linda's death and the pattern of destroyed women. By 8:15, the FBI announced an expanded investigation into Richard Harrison. They had received substantial evidence of judicial corruption and were treating it as a priority case. By 8:30, the IRS announced criminal charges against Victoria Harrison for tax fraud and embezzlement. By 9, I called in all of Harrison Luxury Group's debt, $18 million due in 48 hours. I knew they could not pay. Nobody could liquidate that much that fast. By 9:30, Malcolm filed emergency custody motions for Courtney, documenting Victoria's history of using psychiatric commitment as a weapon against women she wanted to destroy. By 10, my own attorneys filed complete custody documents for Hope, including sworn statements from doctors, psychologists, and character witnesses proving I was fit to parent. By noon, the Harrison empire was in freefall. I watched from Rose's apartment, Hope sleeping in my arms. The news coverage was relentless, talking heads analyzing every revelation. Legal experts predicting prison time for both Richard and Victoria. Financial analysts speculating about the complete collapse of Harrison Luxury Group. My phone rang constantly. Interview requests, congratulations from old friends. Apologies from people who had doubted me. I answered none of them. I just sat there with my daughter and watched the destruction of the people who had tried to destroy us. It should have felt satisfying. Years of pain, months of planning, everything coming together exactly as I had designed. Instead, I felt empty, hollow, like something had been taken from me that could never be returned. Revenge, I was learning, is not as sweet as it seems in movies. Richard Harrison requested an emergency meeting that afternoon. I agreed. At my office in the Nova Mine building, my territory, my rules. He arrived with Victoria and Marcus, all three looking diminished. Richard's commanding presence had crumbled. Victoria's perfect facade was cracked and leaking. Marcus just looked lost, like a child who had wandered into a battlefield. They were escorted to the conference room on the 47th floor. I was waiting for them in my red power suit, Hope sleeping in a carrier beside me. Behind me stood Diane, Malcolm, and three more attorneys. Richard sat down heavily. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a single morning. "You have to call off these attacks." His voice was hoarse. "Name your price. Everyone has a price." I let the silence stretch for a long moment before responding. 3 years ago, I had a price. It was simple. Genuine love. A real family. You decided I was not worth even that. Victoria spoke through clenched teeth. "This is ridiculous. You are destroying an entire family over a failed marriage. You need psychiatric help." I turned to look at her. The woman who had poured wine on my head, who had made me kneel, who kept photographs of broken women like trophies. "I am not destroying your family, Victoria. I am revealing it. Every bribe Richard paid, every woman you helped him bury, every dollar you stole from charity, every life you ruined. You destroyed yourselves decades ago. I am just finally turning on the lights." Marcus spoke quietly, his voice cracking. "Elena, the baby, that is my daughter too. Please, I will do anything." I studied my ex-husband's face, searching for any trace of the man I had once loved, the man who had asked about my dreams, the man who had said he wanted something real. That man had never existed, or if he had, he was too weak to survive his own family. "Her name is Hope," I said. "And yes, she is your daughter, biologically, but you will never have unsupervised access to her. You will never teach her that power means destroying the powerless. You can know her if you earn that privilege. But you will never own her. No one will ever own her." I stood up. "This meeting is over. Your debt is due in 47 hours. Your lawyers can contact my lawyers." I picked up Hope's carrier and walked toward the door. "Elena, wait." Richard's voice was desperate. "We can make a deal. I have information, connections, resources. We can help each other." I paused at the door and looked back one final time. "You had your chance to help me. You could have welcomed me into your family. You could have seen me as a daughter instead of a threat. Instead, you made me kneel while your wife destroyed my wedding dress." I held up Hope's carrier slightly. "Look at her, Richard. She is the only Harrison who matters now. And she will grow up in a world where you and everything you represent no longer exist." I walked out without looking back. The aftermath unfolded over the following months. Richard Harrison was convicted on 14 federal counts: wire fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury unanimous. The judge, one of the few in the state who had never taken Richard's money, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. They sent him to a facility 3 states away. I heard he requested solitary confinement after other inmates recognized him from the news coverage. He spends 23 hours a day alone now. With nothing but his thoughts for company, his former colleagues send Christmas cards to his victims. Victoria Harrison was convicted on charity fraud and tax evasion charges. 3 years in prison plus full restitution of the $2.3 million she had stolen. She was released after 18 months for good behavior. The last I heard, she works at a thrift store in Arizona, sorting donated clothes from women like the ones she used to look down on. She has not contacted her children since her release. Whether from shame or spite, I do not know. Marcus Harrison was not charged with any crimes. He is weak, not criminal. He lost his job when Harrison Luxury Group collapsed, lost his inheritance when his father's assets were seized, lost his status when everyone who used to admire his family name suddenly developed amnesia. He works at a rental car company now, assistant manager. He sees Hope once a month, supervised at a family center. He started therapy, I heard, wrote me a letter that took him 6 months to finish, apologizing for everything. I read the letter. I did not respond, but I kept it for Hope. Someday, when she is old enough, she will read it and understand that people can be broken and still trying to heal. Ashley Summers moved to Nevada after the scandal. Her baby's real father wants nothing to do with them. She tends bar at a casino, I heard, saw me on the cover of Forbes, and changed the channel. I do not think about her much, but there is one person I think about often. Courtney Harrison. She got Lucy back, testified against both her parents in open court, which was the hardest thing she had ever done. Sat on that witness stand and told the truth about everything she had seen growing up. The manipulation, the destroyed women, the box of photographs. Victoria could not look at her during the testimony. Richard just stared, straight ahead, his face empty. Afterward, Courtney collapsed in my arms and cried for an hour. Now she runs the Harrison Family Victims Fund. I provided the initial donation, but she built the organization from the ground up. They help women escaping financial abuse and domestic violence, providing legal assistance, housing support, job training. Last month, they served their 5,000th client. We talk every Sunday. Lucy and Hope have become almost cousins, inseparable when they are together, building a new kind of family from the wreckage of the old one. 5 years later. Morning light streams through the windows of my kitchen. Hope is sitting at the breakfast table, eating pancakes with chocolate chips, arranged in a smiley face. She is 5 years old now. She has her father's eyes and my stubbornness. She asks questions constantly, about everything, from why the sky is blue to why some people are mean to why pancakes taste better with faces on them. Rosa is at the stove, making more pancakes. She lives next door now, in the apartment I bought so she could be close. She is 82 years old, silver-haired, and slower than she used to be, but her hands still know how to make bread better than anyone else in the world. Hope calls her Abuela Rosa, Grandmother Rosa. The name makes Rosa cry sometimes when she thinks no one is looking. Mommy, Hope says through a mouthful of pancake, why do I have 2 houses? I set down my coffee cup. What do you mean, sweetheart? I have this house with you and Abuela Rosa, and I have the Saturday house where I see Daddy Marcus. I kneel down to her level, the way I always do when she asks hard questions. You have 2 houses because a lot of people love you. That is a good thing, even when it is complicated. She thinks about this. Is Daddy Marcus a bad person? I consider my answer carefully. Marcus has changed in 5 years. Therapy helped. Losing everything helped more. He is trying to be a better person than he was raised to be. Daddy Marcus made some bad choices a long time ago. He hurt Mommy very much, but he is trying to be better now. And people can change, Hope. People can always choose to be better. That is what I want you to remember. She nods solemnly, then returns to her pancakes. The philosophical moment is over. A knock at the door. James Carter lets himself in, wearing his work clothes, sawdust in his hair. He is a contractor I met 3 years ago at a Habitat for Humanity build. I was there to donate money. He was there to donate labor. We argued about the best way to hang drywall. He had no idea who I was. By our 3rd date, I was falling in love with him. By our 5th date, I told him the truth about my wealth, expecting it to change everything. He shrugged and said, "Cool. Can you pass the salt?" That was when I knew. We are not married. I am not sure I will ever marry again. But he shows up. Every single day, he shows up. He makes Hope laugh. He asks about my day and actually listens to the answer. He loves me for who I am, not what I have. Ready for the big day? he asks, kissing my cheek. As ready as I will ever be. The grand opening ceremony is at noon. Rosa's Bakery has expanded. 12 locations now, all across the city, all employing women transitioning out of difficult situations. The original location, the one where Rosa found me sleeping in my car 6 years ago, has been renovated and expanded. Today is the ribbon cutting for the new flagship store. The mayor will be there. Television cameras, dignitaries, but mostly there will be women. Women who found jobs at Rosa's Bakeries when no one else would hire them. Women who learned to make bread and found they were making new lives. Women who passed through our program and went on to start their own businesses. Rosa's daughter gives the main speech, not Maria, who is gone, but the daughter Rosa has made from all the women she has helped over the years. 5 years ago, she says, her voice carrying over the crowd, my mother found a woman sleeping in her car behind this bakery. She had nothing except a baby in her belly and a heart that refused to quit. I am standing in the back, holding Hope's hand, trying not to cry. My mother gave her a room and a job. That woman gave my mother a legacy. These bakeries, all 12 of them, they are not about bread. They are about second chances. They are proof that when we help each other, we all rise. The crowd applauds. The ribbon is cut. The doors open. Hope tugs at my hand. Mommy, was that lady talking about you? Yes, sweetheart. You slept in a car? I did, when I had nothing else. But now you have everything. I kneel down again, looking into my daughter's eyes. So like her father's. So unlike him in every way that matters. No, sweetheart. Now I have enough. There is a difference. We drive home through the old neighborhood, past the church where Pastor James still preaches. He is outside, helping an elderly woman carry groceries. He waves. Hope waves back. Uncle James, she calls him, past the empty lot where I used to sleep in my car. It is a community garden now. Vegetables grow where despair used to live. Children play where I once cried myself to sleep. Past a faded sign that says, Harrison Hotels. The building behind it is empty. Condemned. Scheduled for demolition next month. What was that place, Mommy? Nothing important. Not anymore. Home. The house is modest for someone of my wealth. 3 bedrooms. A yard with a garden. A neighborhood with other children for Hope to play with. I wanted her to grow up normal, or as normal as possible. I wanted her to know the value of things that cannot be bought. On my office wall, there is a framed flash drive, the one Courtney gave me. Below it, a small plaque with words I wrote myself. Some storms come to clear your path. People ask me sometimes if I got my revenge, if I enjoyed watching the Harrisons fall, if it felt as good as I imagined. I tell them the truth. Revenge was never really the point. The point was building something they could never tear down. A company that treats people fairly. A network of bakeries that gives women second chances. A family of people who chose each other. A life where my daughter will never have to kneel for anyone. They thought they buried me. They did not understand. I was a seed. That evening, after dinner, after bath time, after 3 bedtime stories, and 1 glass of water, and 1 more trip to the bathroom, Hope finally falls asleep. I stand in her doorway, watching her breathe. The mobile above her bed turns slowly, casting star-shaped shadows on the walls. The same mobile from the crib I bought when I first dared to hope we might make it. There's a letter in my drawer, the one I almost wrote to her that night when I thought about giving up. I rewrote it later, when things changed. When I found my strength again. Someday, when she is older, I will show it to her. I will tell her the whole story, the humiliation and the heartbreak. The people who tried to destroy us. The people who saved us. The long road from kneeling on that cold marble floor to standing in this warm house. Whilst watching my daughter sleep. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want to look at her, to remember how far we have come, to feel grateful for everyone who helped us along the way. Rosa, Diane, Malcolm, Pastor James, Courtney, James Carter, and so many others. They thought I was nobody. They should have Googled me. I walk to my office and sit down at my desk. An email from Courtney is waiting. Lucy asked about Hope today. She wants to know if they can have a sleepover. Also, the foundation helped its 5,000th woman this month. We are just getting started. Thank you for giving me a reason to be brave. I smile and type back, tell Lucy that Hope says yes to the sleepover, and Courtney, you were always brave. You just needed someone to be brave with. See you Sunday. On my desk is a photograph in a handmade frame, taken at Hope's christening 5 years ago. Me, holding Hope in my arms. Rosa beside me, crying happy tears. Diane and Malcolm standing proud. Pastor James with his hand raised in blessing. Courtney with Lucy on her hip. James Carter, who had just come into my life, standing a little awkwardly at the edge of the frame. My family. None of them related to me by blood. All of them bound to me by something stronger, written on the frame, in my own handwriting. We chose each other. The phone rings. A number I do not recognize. Hello? Ms. Mitchell? This is Jennifer Reyes from the Tribune. I am writing a follow-up piece on the Harrison family case, 5 years later. I was hoping to get a comment from you. I consider hanging up. Then I consider what I want to say. I have one comment. Yes? Tell your readers that every woman who has ever been told she is nothing, who has been pushed down or held back or made to feel worthless, she should know that the people who diminished her were wrong. She has power they cannot imagine. She has strength they will never understand. I pause. And tell them one more thing. What is that? Never underestimate the quiet ones. We are usually the most dangerous. I hang up before she can ask any follow-up questions. Closing this story is not just about revenge. It is about resurrection. It is proof that the woman they dismissed as nothing can become everything. That the moment they thought was your ending was actually your beginning. Elena did not just survive. She transformed her pain into purpose, her betrayal into a billion-dollar lesson, and her broken heart into a legacy that will outlive everyone who tried to break her. Remember this, they thought they buried her. They did not know she was a seed. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or if you know someone who needs to hear this right now, do 3 things for me. First, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. Second, drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone who later regretted it? I read every single comment. And third, share this video with that one friend who is going through a hard season right now. Sometimes, all someone needs is a story that reminds them they are not alone. Thank you for staying until the end. You are part of this community now. And in this community, we rise together. This content has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and inspiration. Every story we share is crafted with purpose, designed not just to entertain, but to empower you with wisdom you can carry into your own life. Thank you for trusting us with your time. Later that night, I stand at my window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Harrison is in a prison cell, alone with his memories of power he will never have again. Somewhere out there, Victoria Harrison is sorting donated clothes, surrounded by reminders of everything she lost. Somewhere out there, Marcus Harrison is studying for the therapy certification he is trying to earn, determined to help other people avoid the mistakes he made. Somewhere out there, thousands of women are sleeping safely in homes They built with help from people who believed in them. And here, in this house, my daughter is dreaming. I do not know what she dreams about. Probably pancakes, maybe unicorns, hopefully stars. I hope she never dreams about kneeling. The last letter I wrote to Hope, the one I will give her someday, ends like this. Dear Hope, when you were born, I was terrified, not of being a mother, but of the world you were entering. A world where powerful people destroy the powerless, where money buys justice, where women are told to be quiet and grateful and small. I did not want that world for you, so I burned it down, not with fire, with truth, with courage, with the help of people who believed that things could be different. And from the ashes, we built something new, the bakeries where women learn to rise, the foundation where survivors find help, the company where everyone is treated with dignity, the family where people choose to love each other. That is your inheritance. Hope, not money, not power, but a world that is slightly less cruel than the one I was born into. A world where people, like the Harrisons, do not always win. I did not do this alone. I had help every step of the way. People who saw me when I could not see myself. People who believed in me when I had stopped believing. That is the other part of your inheritance, the knowledge that no one succeeds alone. That strength means asking for help when you need it. That family is not just the people you are born to, but the people you choose and who choose you. I love you, Hope, more than I have ever loved anything, more than I loved the empire I built, or the revenge I took, or the justice I finally found. You are my greatest accomplishment, not because of anything you will achieve, just because you exist, just because you are mine. They thought they buried me. They did not know I was a seed. And you, my darling girl, are the flower. Love forever, your mom.